Welcome to Lunatic Fringe Radio, where all of us have cat's heads and wear suits from the 18th century. Isn't that right, Andrew?
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, that's the image I'm using for this one. Folks, that's a kind of a little inside joke between me and Andrew almost gets the joke, but like we've recorded this damn podcast. This is the third time. And I never...
If you count the interview with Morright, it's the fourth time.
Oh, good God. And I keep failing to transcode it and magic it into a video. And then a week later, we're not sure if we sounded like idiots, so it never gets posted. But anyway, I'm speaking with my buddy Andrew Summit, who he is a fellow... Well, I'm an ex-member, but he's kind of quasi on the line with the Less Wrong community. Less Wrong is a group, organization, blog, whatever, that I highly, highly recommend. It's called Less Wrong, and the banner is a split image between a map and the territory, because it's all about trying to be less wrong, trying to understand where human biases, get in your way, make you be stupid, etc., etc. And
it's also highly, highly about transhumanism.
Yes, exactly. Oh God, don't even get me started on the trans. Seriously, getting into arguments with people I've never read. Smart people I admire, who've never read anything about transhumanism, and realizing that when I'm trying to explain uploading minds to them, that they're working on, not to be mean, because I love these people and they're smart, but they're working on the Star Trek level. It's frustrating. Great blog, but Andrew, like myself, got sick of it, and he started up More Right.
I would say I joined More Right. I want to give credit where credit's due.
Conquistador, I've always loved his comments. I fucking love that guy. He is brilliant. Who else?
We have Michael Anisimov, I think you pronounce his name. I don't say names out loud incredibly often. We chat in IRC and stuff like that.
Eastern European?
Yeah, I believe he did the media stuff for SIAI/MIRI, the Less Wrong people. And then we have Athrion, who is a very prolific poster on Less Wrong. And who else do we have? I'm on there. I have a couple of posts out there reconciling the modern conservative intellectual movement with the nascent reactionary blogosphere.
It's basically, Less Wrong is absolutely brilliant if you want to talk about quantum mechanics or human rationality or transhumanism. However, and I really need to catch up. I've been meaning to do a post about talking to engineers, but there's a predominance of engineers and science majors who don't realize how the humanities works, how twisted and screwed up the humanities are right now, and yet how influential they are on everything. So there's a huge leaning towards liberalism on Less Wrong. So More Right basically got started as a reactionary response to it, to take the scientific wisdom of Less Wrong and apply it to hardcore right-wing politics. Is that apt?
I'd say that's fairly apt, yeah. I put in my own proviso that I love the Wrestling community. I'm friends with several members of there. I've grown philosophically estranged from their strict materialist point of view over time.
Yeah, Less Wrong is not our enemies. They're you're not going to go yell at an engineer who designs really good cars because he thinks Obama's a nice guy.
Oh, Obama is a nice guy. I just want Obama to hear that right now.
Yes, we love you. You don't need to listen to our telephony machines. Anyway, so both of us love Less Wrong. Go, if you haven't read the sequences on Less Wrong, go read them. You will get smarter.
Telling someone to read the sequences is kind of an insult at this point. They're very, very long.
Put aside a month. No, I seriously, when I ran into Less Wrong, Tucker Max actually introduced me to Less Wrong.
Did he?
And I seriously spent the next month slacking off, showing up late to work, just reading obsessively. And that's before they even had the wiki sorting them all out. I was just doing a wiki walk on. I had 20 tabs open of Less Wrong. It was ugly.
Yeah, they are really good at cross-linking everything, always.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we were talking about how to ask questions earlier, especially related to politics and morality and complex systems and all that fun stuff.
Exactly. Like this is part of partly I want to promote more right to you as well as Less Wrong, but basically Andrew's a brilliant guy and we've been needing to do this bloody post for a while. And I've had so much Stampede nonsense and flooding nonsense and secret project nonsense that I've been behind. So what the hell were we talking about?
I was talking about how in political philosophy, in particular, but very generally, at least in the conservative intellectual movement, which I really want to distinguish between the Anglo-conservative political movement. Some of the people aren't associated with, some of the people are more right-wing. It's a complicated picture when it comes to those two. But anyway, there's a tendency on the political sides of the aisle and the way they ask questions. The liberal people will tend to ask the question of the good society in positive terms. That is, what is the good society and how do we get there? And so Plato's Republic is written, and so Rousseau drafts his vision of the just society, and so does John Rawls, and on through the ages, you see people making positive visions of what ought to be done. The conservative-minded person, however, has a completely different set of questions in play, and these are negative questions. Rather than asking the question of the good society in positive terms, that is saying, what is a good society and how will we get there? They ask the question in negative terms. What is tyranny? What is bad and how do we avoid it?
Well,
what is degeneracy? What is
economic
impiety?
global war?
In any question, they tend to take an avoidance sort of view of it rather than taking a toward sort of goal. This is similar to what psychologists might call strategic optimists, these type A personalities that look at a goal and say, how do I get there? And then there's a psychological type that is defensive pessimists that will look at a goal and look at everything standing in the way and say, how do I avoid that? They both get to the goal many of the times, in psychology at least. The problem that besets politics is it's really fucking hard.
Well, and the question is, what are we fucking with? What is the cost? There's a video that I've been trying to figure out how to do it exactly. I got inspired by some writing of Asimov. Was it Asimov? I forget. But just addressing the question of sexual jealousy. See, nowadays we play so fast and loose with sexuality, and we have, like, there are so many casualties that happen along the way. Like, the point I'm going to be trying to make in the video is that sexual jealousy is such a violent, primal thing that you can pretend that you're the most rational person in the world. If you get into a case with sexual jealousy, you will become completely incoherent. And so, trying to become civilized, we start building up all these institutions to regulate sexuality. Like, sex is awesome when you do it right. But if you do it wrong, you are messing with some very, very primal forces. And so, rather than just looking at the goal and say, how do I get there, and knocking down all the obstacles, all the institutions, it's the recognition that a lot of these institutions, actually, you might have been the one that said this, but if you go out so you're wandering through a field, and
this originates with G.K. Chesterton, and Robert Frost also has a version of this with a wall rather than a fence.
Mm-hmm. But if you encounter a fence in a field, which I once did when I was a kid, you should ask yourself, why is this fence here? Now, I jumped over the fence, and I had a couple of fucking stallions chase me all over a goddamn yard. And like, climbed up a 20-foot wall to get away from the bastards. I thought they were going to kill me. They were probably just being friendly, but...
That right there is a great metaphor for the French Revolution.
Yeah. The thing is that there's a reason...
The stallion is Napoleon.
Yeah, he was just having fun, but...
Napoleon doesn't know any better. He's just doing what he does.
Yeah, they were probably not going to kick me to death, but I didn't know about horses, even though I'm from Alberta. So you got a couple of horses trotting around and fucking looking at you funny. You get the fuck out of there.
Alberta's like upside down cold Texas, right?
Basically, it's the Texas of Canada. We love guns. We hate the federal government.
All right. Do you try to... But you're not Quebec. Texas constantly tries to secede.
Well, there's secession movements in Alberta.
Huh. Does anyone in Canada actually want to be in Canada?
See, the thing is that the Quebec separatist movement wants to separate but keep getting welfare. It's like the kid that wants to move out from home and wants to still get a stipend, whereas the
people who used to be in Brooklyn but now went to Brunswick and Charleston, South Carolina, I hear.
Probably.
The hipsters with trust funds who now can't afford Brooklyn.
Quebec is angry because the French hate them. They speak a degenerate form of French, and their culture is being subsumed in that of English Canada, which is understandable, but whereas Alberta is like, well, we're the only productive province in the country, and we're paying for the socialists on the east and west coast. How about they fuck off and we just keep our oil money and our ugly cities for ourselves?
So libertarians, such as they are, tend to live in Alberta?
Albertans tend to be pretty libertarian-ish. They're more conservative in that, like, I believe the way I grew up is the way things have always been, and I don't want them to change.
Mm-hmm.
But leaning towards libertarian, stay the fuck away from my guns, stop taxing me so much.
Mm.
But it's okay if they ban smoking, because, you know, you gotta do what the government says. Those are the rules.
So going back to that core question, a lot of this can be described as everything. As Whitehead said, that famous all philosophy is footnotes to Plato. I think it was. Was that it? Do you know?
I don't know if that's who said it, but I've heard the quote.
I know it's Alfred North Whitehead who said it. I just didn't know if that was the exact quote. You see this a lot in the interplay between Plato and his student Aristotle. Plato has this very concrete vision of the good society. It should be won by a wise philosopher king. It should mandate how people breed. It should have all these eugenic practices. People should be regimented. There should be no singers and playwrights. Someone like Leo Strauss would say, of course, he's being satirical with all this, but the mainstream historical way to interpret it is that Plato's actually being very earnest. And then you have someone like Aristotle, who comes on the scene and actually endorses several ways of politics, but notes the different ways they can fall astray. He says that the Athenians in the past did have a good democracy, but now it's fallen into something like demagoguery. And Aristotle, who wants to locate the virtuous or right action as a moderation between 2 points, says that there's monarchy, and monarchy can be very good, but it can degenerate into tyranny or an absent king. And same with aristocracy. Same with aristocrats. Sorry, I can't talk right now. Aristocracy literally means rule by the best, but plutocracy means rule by the richest. So the richest people may be the best people, or they may not be, and their interests may or may not align with those of the polity. So rather than having this one vision of the good society like Plato has, Aristotle asked the question, how do we avoid bad societies, and ends up endorsing, or at least saying these can be good societies, provided they avoid their failure modes. And that's what the conservative intellectual movement has been concerning itself with. They think that, say, the American Constitution for Americans was a good institution and a good mean between 2 points and is worthy of keeping it in play and keeping it in check, and they would oppose subversions of that order.
There's actually a post I'm working on right now, because lately I've been upsetting a lot of people on the libertarian right-wing spectrum by attacking libertarianism. Damn it,
Well, that will tend to piss them off.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah, of course it will. I've been, you know what, I think I'm looking at the wrong link right now, so I'm not going to say what it is, but it's a book that better monarchy than democracy, but the guy still favors anarcho-capitalism.
Hans Hermann Hoppe?
Yes, okay, I am looking at the right link then.
Democracy, the God That Failed is the book.
Yes, exactly. And it's actually perfect, because I've been looking through this, and I'm not going to spoil the whole post, because it's only to write the damn thing, but about how, like, the cached assumptions in it, that, like, right now, we are suffering a time of absolute overweening state, of, like, insane, self-destructive, cancerous levels of state. And so, anybody with half a brain on their head is going towards the libertarian side of things, the anarcho-capitalist side of things, because at this point it seems like...
Well, anyone with a brain on their head and, not potentially going to benefit, like, say, an economist or... I don't want to imply all liberals are either idiots or... Personally, I know you would rather, but I don't want to imply all liberals are idiots or else they're looking for their own power, but... People who want power will tend to be liberal.
Well, if you want to rule right now, why would you be a conservative? You would be a liberal if you wanted power. I mean, it's Jesus. If you're a child molester, what do? You go become a government agent to take care of adopted children.
I believe I'm going to find the statistic, but it was in between. It was some like 10 or 100 or something. I say this as someone who's perpetually annoyed by this little controversy of the priest sex scandal. If you look at the actual statistics of it, because it gets so much attention from the mass media and it gets so much attention from people's individual thoughts. If you look at, say, the statistics of other clergy, it's about similar but a little lower. And if you look at the public school system by orders of magnitude is worse. Much, much worse.
Now, Andrew, by the way, folks, he is a member of the One True Church. But nonetheless, I think I have those statistics bookmarked. I will post them below. That your child is about 100 times as likely to get raped by a school teacher as by a priest.
Yeah. I personally found that statistic shocking.
I mean, it's 100? Like 10 or 20 maybe, but 100? That's a pretty shocking statistic.
Yeah, I'm remembering it as 100, but I'm reaching back in my mind saying it can't be 100, but no, I can't remember exactly. Is it? Okay.
At least, well, I'm going to link the article below, so maybe we're both shitheads, but I recall it being approximately 100.
It's a large number, I remember that.
I mean, I'm sure the real number is like 97.4, and there's two articles. There's the newspaper report and the actual article if you want to read math. Mm-hmm. But the newspaper report said 100.
Anyway, you were talking about libertarianism and the state and wanting less of a state.
Right. And so the big problem with all of this is that when we become capital L libertarians, when we start turning libertarianism into a faith, it is too easy to exploit. And we get back to that conservative question, why is the fence here? And see, now if you try and enact libertarianism, what happens is that whenever you try and enact libertarianism that's bad for the liberals, they put the brakes on. Anytime you try and enact libertarianism that allows the virus into the body, they say go right the fuck ahead. You're right, borders should be open. We should invite everybody to live in North America.
I believe it was John Derbyshire in his Radio Derb recently used the slogan, minimal security minimal liberty outside the border because we need maximum liberty inside the border.
Mm-hmm.
And that once we're sufficiently scrupulous about who comes in and out of the country, we can afford to be generous in liberty to the people within it. One of my objections to libertarianism, it depends on what kind of libertarianism we're talking about.
To clarify, I'm very specifically only attacking the ideological libertarianism. I will be a libertarian even if I have to die on the cross to be a libertarian. So, as opposed to damn it, people, sometimes you gotta play ball. Hell, I'll die by my principles, but a political theory of governance is not a principle, it's an idea.
There are essentially two types of libertarians. I want to distinguish them and throw out some key figures so that people know what I'm doing. There is the consequentialist theory of libertarianism, and these are people like Milton Friedman. This is people like the Chicago School, and these people say that we want to construct a society that has the maximum overall well-being for individuals, and the way that you happen to do that is through free market capitalism. It could have been social welfare state. It could have been aristocracy. It could have been any other things. But as a social scientist, Milton Friedman would say, I would recommend free market capitalism as the way to attain a good society. On the other hand, you have what is primarily from, but not entirely, Nozick is a good example of this, of someone who isn't Austrian, but mostly you have the deontological school of libertarianism. Let's say liberty is an absolute right which cannot in any conscionable sense ever be violated, and liberty is such a restrictive right that the options for a state either don't exist in the case of anarcho-capitalism, or only to the extent where it is a night watchman in the case of Nozick's minarchism. It's the latter sort of libertarianism I object to, because I don't think that particularly Rothbardian natural law holds up to philosophical scrutiny. Now, I don't think I've paid enough attention and enough scrutiny to Nozick's vision of libertarianism, so I'll stay silent there. I have my doubts, and I've read a decent amount on it, but I don't think I thought on the issue nearly enough. But I will say that, on average, the modal anarcho-capitalist or deontological libertarian I come in contact with, I tend to disagree with their philosophical arguments quite a bit.
God, I've got a lot to say, but I'm saving it for that post I'm writing, because I want to have this down in writing and references. I don't want to, if I start talking about the ideas, I'll never want to write them. But a huge part of this the anarcho-capital side of libertarianism, the big L libertarianism, the ideological libertarianism, it completely misses the concept of the nation state. It's angry because the nation state in every country in the West has become cancerous. But the lymph node system is good, even if the lymph nodes are becoming infected. There's a reason that fence is sitting there in the field. There's a reason that nationalistic countries survived while other forms of states failed. And to just blindly throw away that and have absolute faith in the free market to provide everything you need.
Well, one of my major objections over time I'm basically convinced I still need to do a lot of reading, but from the arguments at least, I am convinced that in the case of prudent globalization, I'll say it like that, capitalism has unhooked the interests of the wealthy class of a given country from the interests of the average citizen. And this basically comes down to me not thinking that an average citizen who isn't greatly skilled and doesn't have the capability to be greatly skilled has any comparative advantage over a Chinese person who's just basically left in the dust to be on the welfare dole or at the behest of charity and basically lives a life of minimal dignity. In America, there's a big problem of SSDI, of formal factory workers and former dock workers, people who work physically intensive, low-skilled jobs, and when those jobs get shipped away or automated, just basically go on Social Security disability at age 40, an age where they could still reskill in something like a skilled trade, like an electrician or a heating and repair, but the economic incentive apparently just isn't there, or they do it.
To put it bluntly, if you have a global economy, you have a global minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
Not to launch into a huge debate about minimum wage based upon the society. Like here in Calgary, there's so much oil money flowing here that you cannot hire somebody to work at Tim Hortons for minimum wage just because the rent's too bloody high. Nobody will work for minimum wage. Slinging coffee or slinging burgers, you need to pay them more. But as soon as you get that global economy, all of a sudden you can go do whatever you want wherever it's cheapest. And when you have a global, like, it becomes, see, here's the funny thing, is that, like, this perfect version of free market capitalism starts to look a lot like perfect Soviet Union socialism, where everybody's a replaceable cog, where you're just a cog that lives in North America and, we can ship the company over to China to do the production over there? All right.
I would say the core of my objection comes from the idea of a replaceable cog, but not quite in that way. To me, it's always a danger sign when people become replaceable in that way. Not because it dehumanizes the individual, though definitely that tends to happen, especially in, say, communism, where people are, killed by the truckload, where having glasses is enough to get you the death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
But rather because I view it as a warning sign that you've abstracted too much, and whenever you're trying to design policy, you haven't gone concrete enough.
Let me re-put this in. If you've got the perfect bridge, but you need a magical material to build it out of, something's wrong with your theory about building bridges.
Mm-hmm.
And that people, and I guess, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but both you and I think that human beings have value in and of themselves, that there is something unique and special about the human.
Well, we've had this debate before. I don't think I appreciate that you have that. I just don't think you have a philosophical reason for thinking it.
Oh, well, God, we can get into that, but we both, let's just agree to agree on something without arguing it, for crying out loud.
Okay. I just couldn't go without poking the nihilist bear.
I'm a Nietzschean, okay? Nihilists are people that are too stupid to read Nietzsche.
Or just read just fake Zarathustra
and think he's being sarcastic in the entire piece. Mm. Anyway, now listen, sometimes it's useful to think of people as cogs. Like if you're trying to figure out how many people are coming to your restaurant and how much food you need to order, thinking of them as cogs is useful. But if the base of your theory winds up treating people like cogs, I've got some moral objections there. Seems to me that there is something major missing from your theology if starving, how many million Ukrainians is
I don't know the exact numbers. But those are a Google away. These are. It's not like we're talking about obscure historical events.
I believe it's 7 million, and it was during peacetime.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be a Nazi apologist, you can definitely bring that up. That Nazis might have been evil, but they certainly weren't as evil as the Soviet Union.
Oh yeah, and we've had that conversation about why is exactly that we have these. I would say justifiable. I would go as far as I would say absolutely justifiable immune responses to Nazi-style fascism. But we don't have anywhere near similar responses to communism. And now being a communist is kind of,
in vogue.
it's not really in vogue. I mean, what great communist people out there can you name? I can think of Zizek, maybe. I don't think he's an out-and-out communist. I think he's a welfare state capitalist. Chomsky's not quite a communist. He's a left libertarian, but he's somewhat. His concerns seem to be similar about class warfare.
Actually, do you read?
I think being a communist is kind of a mark against you, but it's kind of like something people see as silly rather than dangerous. Whereas if you're a white nationalist, you're perceived as being profoundly dangerous and profoundly disordered. And being a communist is something like a phase a kid might go through.
Do you read No Man?
I have on occasion, yeah.
So he had a really great piece that the Soviet Union was not communist, it was socialist. And that socialism is just a step on the path to communism. Like the ultimate path of communism, of Marxism, is that these people think they have defined, they have imagined the utopia, and it's just all of our evil instincts, like you and me thinking people aren't cogs and believing the soul has nobility. It's like all of these institutions, marriage, religion, culture, nationalism, these are impediments to creating the new Soviet man. And so socialism, they know socialism doesn't work. That's not why they institute it. They institute socialism because it destroys everything noble about the human soul. And it is you can resist torture. Some people can resist torture, but nobody can resist socialism. Do it effectively enough, and everybody begs the government for their food, for the survival of their children.
Now, I want you to nuance that a bit, because I'm pedantic in that way, and I don't...
You?
I'm pedantic in that way that I don't tend to really like soaring rhetoric, and I prefer these really nuancy sort of things. You don't actually believe that they think that we have all these noble qualities in man, and we need to get rid of them. They don't view them as noble in the first place, right?
Oh, exactly. Like they view these. They imagine this perfect world. I don't know how to describe it except to say it.
I can describe it, but I don't have the quote in front of me right now.
Well, there's a great bit by what's his name? The guy at Fat Pie, David Firth, where I find you disagreeable. That is acceptable. Let's make a humming noise. Without the influence of television, I have no urge to be violent. It's this great video where they ban all television and newspapers, so people are finally peaceful and living in harmony. And they have things like the big book of different shades of gray I've seen of my life. Like, it's impossible to describe it without satirizing it, but they actually have this utopia where humans are these worker ants that are never in conflict. And if they just can break us enough, because we all are too faithful to the patriarchy, to religion, to culture, to nationalism. If they can break us from loyalty, if I can walk into a room and feel perfect brotherhood with men and women, white and black, etc., if we can all be perfect worker ants, we will have perfect brotherhood and utopia. Now, that said, the leaders of communist countries tend to be, criminals.
Okay, the vision of society, I found it. It's from Marx and his work German Ideology, written in 1845. In communist society, where no one has an exclusive sphere of activity, but each can become accomplished in any branch he wishes, society regulates the general production, and thus makes it possible for me to do one thing today, another tomorrow, to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, just as I have a mind, without ever becoming a hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic. To me, that is entirely fanciful.
You heard it here first, folks. Marx was a pinko.
Who knew?
But like, okay, you just found that fucking quote. That's beautiful. Like this imaginary world where
it's one of Marx's most quoted things. It's like David Hume's "Reason is and ought to be the slave of the passions," or Thomas Nagel's "I want there to not be a God. I want the universe to not be like that." It's just the quote that everyone brings out whenever you bring this person up. At least in philosophy classes, this is like the pole quote. Like Whitehead has that as all philosophy is a footnote to Plato.
And they literally believe that any belief or loyalty or anything to culture, patriarchy, nationalism, etc., is a false consciousness. False consciousness is a word that the Marxists use when a guy that's working class says that we should have fair taxes on the rich because he's being disloyal to his class.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's a book that I don't know if you've heard of. It's called "What's the Matter with Kansas," where it kind of just is absolutely wondering about why is Kansas such a Republican state when most of the people there aren't, need quote unquote democratic policies and their kind of redistributive tax policy, and it just is wondering, and it's all weird, especially since this comes back to what was the social conservatives, because the history of social conservatism is incredibly weird if you just go back before World War II. You have people like William Jennings Bryan, who represented the creationist side on the Scopes trial, basically being socialist, not quite, but for as far as left you can go without being actively wanting the current regime to be destroyed. They weren't anarchists, but the Christian right during that period of time was incredibly economically liberal, and they switched after World War II. So this is one thing I like to point out, just to shake people up, to show that our current coalitions, which seem like the natural allies, are actually incredibly weird. I have this thing I always tell people, is that all coalitions are insane by definition. I think you've heard me say that before.
I don't think I have, but that's very true.
There's no such thing as a sane coalition ideology, ever.
By definition, it's incoherent. It's a coalition because they don't agree.
Yeah, they're an alliance of convenience, but they solidify for so long. This is something that a political scientist, I forget the name of the political scientist, but he was on this week's version of Econ Talk. It's July 10th when I'm saying this. This Monday. He said that if you look at people's poll numbers on most questions, those not dealing with sex, but most other questions, about tax policy, about foreign policy, about abortion, not about gay marriage. That's one thing that a lot of people have changed their mind about. But we basically look exactly like the 1970s. It's just our political candidates have gotten more and more extreme, and nobody's played to the center in a long, long time because we no longer have smoke-filled rooms of people, and now we have direct voting in primaries, and the only people who vote in primaries are the true believers. The people who would rather lose with an incredibly pro-life candidate than win with a sort of compromiser, or would rather lose with someone who supports all the Democratic tax policy but happens to be pro-choice. or who happens to be pro-life. So neither party wants a moderate Republican or a moderate Democrat anymore.
Actually, let me ask you something. Have you seen the series? Oh goodness, what's it called? It's about marketing.
About the relative of Sigmund Freud.
Bernays, yes.
Yeah, I've seen that documentary.
Century of Self.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And it's like what it basically boils down to is that they can lifestyle. My buddy, Asymmetrical Warfare was talking about how bullshit the term lifestyle is, and where did this word even come from? Turns out it came from marketers. They broke people down into quote unquote lifestyles, and they could determine what you would buy and what you would respond to in the marketplace based upon your lifestyle. So, the Clinton election, one of the deciding factors was, if I recall correctly, playground safety. A president got elected over playground safety. And it's the power and the terror of modern marketing.
I believe that's what we call soccer moms. They talked about that a lot in the 90s.
Yep. They figured out there was a voting bloc that was very swing, that cared about, and it was 2% of the population, but it was the 2% that mattered. And they got elected. And Bush is no different. Obama is no different. They perfected the science of mind control.
Well, the thing about mind control is it doesn't work the moment you start paying attention to it. This is seen where ads don't really have the effect that they used to, especially on the young, because Generation X and Generation Y grew up just being inundated with ads, and we no longer really trust them. They're kind of in the background. They might be used to entertain us, and that keeps the brand in our heads, but it doesn't make us desire the brand.
Well, like you and me, I'm not bragging, okay? I'm not one of these, I don't watch TV. I watch some TV online, but I haven't even bothered to get a box to make the TV I got for free communicate with the HDTV network. I literally can't watch even basic cable or whatever. I don't watch TV. I don't buy crap from advertisements, which is why I'm not a person being advertised to.
Mm-hmm.
They're advertising to the people that buy shit on a whim.
Well, with advertising, it's kind of like with porn. Someone who watches a lot of porn gets desensitized to two women making out, and so it has to go more and more extreme until the point that midgets and goats everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And with advertising, it's a lot similar. Kids in their formative years watch a lot of advertising. They're really affected by it. They end up driving a lot of purchases, and but by the time they're teenagers, unless they're surrounded by people wearing those brands, a billboard's not going to do much. It's the tastemakers that ended up making the trends in that case. Nobody picked out one direction of all boy bands to be the favorite of teenage girls. It was teenage girls wanting the opinions of other teenage girls, and for some reason or other, focusing on this one band. And I would love to study the network effects and the game theory of the fandom of One Direction. That would just be utterly fascinating to me. It would be interesting because teenage girls are a really interesting model of human beings because you can just they're a simplified model in some ways. They follow a lot of fashion. They follow a lot of they're very dramatic, and some of the social relationships can be complex, but their overriding driving forces tend not to be very complex. And boys are more solitary. They're more loyal to the group, so less interesting things happen in their graph.
You might turn into a nihilist if you did that. All right, so earlier, my brain suggests this is vaguely correlated to it. We're talking about the natural aristocracy and the natural slaves of people. We're talking about superhero movies, right?
Yeah.
90s, we had
John McClane.
yeah, blue collar, real guy, extreme scenario, and like I love that movie because he's like his feet get all fucked up. If you've ever walked on cement, this one time, my buddy and I we were practicing martial arts in his cement backyard slash driveway, and it was okay for about like the 2 hours that we did it. Then afterwards, our feet just started fucking hurting.
Hmm.
If you're not used to walking on cement, it tears your feet apart faster than you might think.
One of the saddest things that happened to my brother, he spent his entire childhood building up an immunity to walking on cement and concrete. He would just, every time we would go to the pool or something, he'd like walk a mile barefoot just to show he was a badass. Then one day in like his 7th grade or something, he jumps off of a diving board wrong and just scrapes his feet, and all of that callus just comes right off his foot.
And it didn't grow back?
No, he just, by 7th grade, he didn't care enough about walking on concrete to be a badass anymore.
Oh,
You have to regrow that shit.
were there two little, what do you call those things that you put in your boots to make them comfortable, just like floating on the water?
Yeah, I guess so. He was hurting a lot. I believe he was bleeding a bit.
Oh God, that's terrible and hilarious.
He just kind of fell off the diving board and scraped his feet the entire way from his foot. And imagine like having the back of your foot just scrape against the edge of it as you kind of belly flop forward.
Oh,
So the entire back of his foot lost all of its callus.
that's maximum sad face.
Yeah. So he spent all this time. You talking about concrete reminded me of that. Anyway, go on.
What were we talking about? Natural.
You're talking about concrete.
Concrete. God, it's fucking terrible on the feet.
Mm-hmm.
It was leading to something that was somehow relevant.
Oh, yeah, you were talking about aristocrats and slaves and so on.
I was.
So I guess I'll start out with how I introduced the subject. One thing we were talking about is if you look into the sociology of the aristocracy, it's actually really, really interesting. You have this group of people who've been in charge for a long, long period of time. And early on in a society, it's kind of necessary to have some kind of hierarchical group where one group gets all the riches but makes all the decisions and can be lynched if they make the bad decisions. Because a lot of early societies work that way. All Arabic societies essentially work that way. I mean, there are a few that don't, I guess. I don't know them all by name, but it's generally the rule that since Epic of Gilgamesh that there's the social contract is you be the absolute ruler, and if you screw up enough, we're going to riot. You see it in Egypt right now. So the system of aristocracy is actually quite stable and actually gives a lot of long-term thinking. The problem is once your society begins to become rich over a short period of time, you have some other method of counting wealth other than land, which is how aristocrats generally, get their status. So now you have all these new rich people. What do you do with them? They don't have the training that you have for long-term thinking and of the ways aristocrats work and how this has worked in the society for so long, and so they don't understand how to do it. The people, you probably haven't educated them at this point, and even if you have educated them, they might go around to bad policies, and it's still a question about how much you can educate a populace to make good policy decisions. So an overriding question that's been asked by societies that started out aristocratic is, what do you do with a whole bunch of new rich people? And this is the nouveau riche is the fancy pants term for it. They don't have the aristocracy's values, and they're kind of looking out for themselves. They're short-term thinking, but they're incredibly powerful.
Now let's bring.
And they earned the position in society instead of being born into it. Let's not forget that.
Well, let's bring it back around to how this all started. I recall we were talking about broken feet because we were talking about John McClane, the action movies from the 80s. They were all blue-collar dudes, whereas the action movies nowadays are all about superheroes. And every single superhero in these modern movies is magically born into it. aside from Batman, Batman earns his position. Okay, yeah, Iron Man, I love Iron Man, but he affords his super suit because he's super rich, and he likes working on cars. But Batman, he is actually crazy enough to learn how to be this uber martial artist, to become this defender of his people, because he is one of the blue bloods. He's one of the old aristocracy. He's not nouveau riche, and they actually criticize the new rich throughout the movies. That Bruce Wayne has to pretend to be one of these idiot loser fucking I got a helicopter.
Self-destructive, Paris Hilton types.
Exactly. And in the third Batman movie, they made fun of the Occupy Wall Street, but they also attacked the nouveau riche. They like these fucking faggots showing up to their fancy, pretentious parties of I'm disconnected from reality. I inherited my wealth. I inherited wealth from somebody that worked hard rather than I'm part of a wealthy family.
One of the best treatments of this that you can get is the Roman tradition of the statue room, or I guess you might call it the bus room. The ancestor room, I think, is a more common name. Do you know of this tradition?
Go on. My Roman history isn't all that good.
Okay, so in every major Roman home, there's this room you would walk into with wax faces everywhere and little plaques, and you would know all these faces by name because these were your ancestors. And they would say, this man served as consul between this and that year, and he led this army and fought in this battle, and this person went on to be a great politician and served in the Senate. And you would be surrounded by all this. And the Roman system was basically a way to get the ruling class to be as ambitious as possible and then channel that ambition into this high-stakes, competitive system that was the Roman political organization. The generals were also the politicians, which put on some perverse incentives, but at the same time brought in a desire to make Rome great in the long term. Now, this would cause a lot of problems around the time of Julius Caesar, but this is getting way ahead of ourselves. What's important to note is that for a long period of time, up until it fell apart, this was one of the best institutions of the ancient world for producing good leaders. Another good sort of vision of this is Theodore Roosevelt's speech, The Strenuous Life, where he calls out other rich people for not being leading scientists and artists, and that the rich people should do this because they do have all this free time, and you happen to be born in this position. And because you're born into this position, you have to lead a harder life, not in material terms, but in sheer amount of work you do, because you have to try to advance society forward. And this is a vision of the aristocracy that is incredibly interesting and not quite the one we usually get. Of course, there is some value also to the kind of the British system of landed elites who don't really do much. They're not caught up into the hubbub of life. They can think more long term. They can take the helm in times of emergency because they've been bred for this for a long period of time instead of, happening upon the rule suddenly. What this ultimately comes down to is how do you manage, because we're not going to get back to a hereditary aristocracy, and it's not even clear that would be a better political system than the one we have. It might be better than the one we have now, to be honest, but it might not be, all that better according to the stresses we have now.
We can argue that it was a great system, but the fact of the matter is that it's not about to reappear.
Mm-hmm. So what we have now is a sorting by IQ that's actually really efficient by the college system. You get these people to know each other in the top 20 schools. You get them to go to the similar jobs, and like I said, it's incredibly efficient. It sets up elites to have really great lives. One of its current failure points is, one, they don't recognize they're aristocrats. They absolutely are once you go to that school and are put into those institutions. You're an aristocrat of a sort, absolutely. You may not have the money, but neither did Julius Caesar. His family hit on hard times before he started his political career. There are plenty of blue bloods who are blue bloods but aren't rich because someone lost their money at some point. So that's what our college system does. The problem with this is, again, first of all, they don't know they're aristocrats, and secondly, even if they were those that are, say, maybe parts of Silicon Valley, parts of places that run charities and stuff, they don't tend to have a great deal of noblesse oblige. They don't tend to think, okay, I have this position in life, I have to use it for the benefit of the nation.
It's Paris Hilton instead of name famous historical figure. Like they use it to be popular and fancy and have a nice car and write popular articles for whatever news magazine, as opposed to feeling dedicated to their people and their society.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are you familiar with the Georgia Guidestones?
No, I'm not familiar.
Okay, so supposedly the guy that made Captain Planet, what's his name? Ted Turner.
I'm not sure.
All right, so the rumor goes that Ted Turner, I think it's Ted Turner, made these damn things, and they're all about we need to reduce the human population to like 1.5 million. We need to, so on and so forth.
That's a really low number.
Oh yeah.
You mean billion?
No, I mean million.
Oh.
Yeah, we need to get rid of surplus population.
I love the euphemism of that. We need to. He probably just said we need our population to reduce, like in the passive voice, in the same way that someone would say mistakes were made.
Yes, I think they are passive, but
well, I mean, in the active voice, it would say we need to kill this many people to get to this level, or we need to sterilize this many people so that they never are able to have children.
Oh, exactly. It's completely pussyfooting around environmentalism.
It's completely pussyfooting around the fact that it will require extreme amounts of force.
But see, here's the thing. So, now, Mitch over at Apocalypse Cometh, Hawaiian Libertarian, I love these guys. These guys are solid individuals that I would trust in a firefight. But, you know, they're so... I'm really trying not to be dismissive here, but they're so angry about the elite plan for genocide, you know, that they're going to get us all addicted to McDonald's burgers so we get heart disease, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you're familiar with that, how, like, we are fed such poison constantly. Mm-hmm. Go have meaningless sex. Go eat hamburgers. You know, buy the latest crap that you don't need from television. And yeah, have you heard of the JCPenney effect?
Where JCPenney tries to do the new sales thing and then they lose a lot of money? Exactly.
You actually try and treat people like adults, and you lose a shitload of money. Mm-hmm. So, like, the kind of default hypothesis amongst men like you and myself and everybody listening is that, like, they're selling poison and calling it candy. But here's the thing: if you try,
the paleo diet says that candy is poison.
Well, you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. They're selling arsenic in candy form. But if you actually try and go to people and say, "Hey, this is real chocolate made with sugarcane and not corn syrup," they'll say, "Oh, it tastes gross. I don't want to buy that. I want more of my candy bars, my whatever." So, I don't know. I'm getting to the point in my life where I have a little bit of sympathy for the Georgia Guidestones. That so many of these damn people on the planet, it was one thing like 20 years ago, there was no internet. You know, we were just watching the mainstream news. Nowadays, there's tons and tons of people talking sense, talking about the way things are. And yet these people are lining up to go buy a McDonald's burger, to go yell Yahoo for Calgary Stampede, to be a special little identical replaceable individual. And personally, I'm losing my empathy for them. Let's take the man-woman thing. It's really unfortunate that all of childhood education, all of mass media, all of television, is telling girls to go out and have sex as if they're guys. Go be a slut. Go, have a threesome. Only for the girls to eventually learn that this destroys their ability to pair bond with a guy. It's really sad. I don't like it. But these people that keep doing all of that stuff seem absolutely incapable of listening to good advice. They love the poison.
Well, there's something that my dad said. My mom had a in-home daycare, and they had foster kids, and so they dealt with people going through crap. Any daycare is usually staffed by working moms who got a divorce or something happened. Whether it was the mother shutting out the father, which we got that a lot, or whether it was the father being abusive, we got that a lot too. Whatever it was, they would always say, you gotta let people hit rock bottom before they'll hear sense, and everyone's rock bottom is at a different place. Some people are just going to continue what they're doing until they feel like they're not getting what they want. And whenever you've been kind of socialized into thinking, and I'm thinking more about us, the average person, and more about, say, someone who's college educated, and will say, well, can you show me proof in the form of a peer reviewed paper and all that stuff?
Oh, God.
Is that until you've been convinced of a good reason to distrust the mainstream sources of credible information, you just don't tend to listen to alternative sources. I mean, who listens to game advice? Guys who've been burned. Like, there's no one who went into game ever. I'm going to go and say ever.
Yeah, I think
that hadn't had his heart crushed and think, I have no idea what I'm doing with this. I'm just going to click this blog. I mean, there's a lot of crap to wade through in those blogs too, and bad stuff taints the image of the good stuff. I mean, it's like this on the right wing all the time. There's crazies out there who are well-meaning, but not especially smart and not especially rational. And they're going to say outrageous things, and people who don't know any better are going to say you are exactly like that person because you take a position sort of like that. I mean, you look at the distinction between someone like, say, a historian of political philosophy like, say, Russell Kirk, and compare him to, say, Sarah Palin, and they bat for the same team, but Kirk's going to look a lot worse in comparison to Sarah Palin because they're batting for the same team. Now, this is something that happens to the right, oddly enough, and it's because the right isn't massively credible in the academe. So when a liberal says something silly, they're just part of this, loony left. They're an environmentalist who is a little off into the Gaia worship. But the left and the media will portray him as mostly harmless. The right-wing people get described as their crazies. So when you think about economics, you think about someone like Paul Krugman. You don't think about a liberal who wants us to tax the rich at 100% and go 100% Europe overnight. Now, Paul Krugman has some other policy roadmap that's basically to the same goal in the end state. But the left gets, or at least tends to be seen by its most credible members, and alternatives to the left and to mainstream society, their least credible members are brought out. So if you're an average person and you don't know that this is the case, and someone says, hey, I've got advice for you, you're going to paint them with that crazy brush. I mean, there are good, smart, intelligent, hardworking, truth-seeking leftists out there. They have different priors than I do. I don't entirely know how to talk with them sometimes, but I know who they are, and some of them are my friends, and we discuss things, and they're smart, and they challenge me. But it's a mistake it's always a mistake to judge people by their worst members. And when you're an average person just going about your day, that's what you'll be exposed to. So when you get exposed to pickup, you're going to be exposed to the silliest stuff, because that's the stuff that's mocked. You're going to be exposed to a straw man version of negging. And you're going to say, ha ha ha, isn't that weird?
And see, this is what a whole bunch of trending and less wrong will get you.
It's, yeah. Well, it's less so with newer members, because transhumanism is based on the basis that a lot of academia is fundamentally insane, or else we'd have a lot more progress in this or that area. Not insane as in, UFOs or anything, but insane as in isn't thinking rationally enough to have enough progress. If they were rational, they'd choose better hypotheses and all that. So it's this basic skepticism that you should apply to our best institutions. Of course, recognize them as the best institutions. The psychology department is going to be better than the opining of a blogger, no matter how good that blogger is, most of the time. Now, sometimes
what I was getting at with the last rant is that a lot of us on the alt-right want to pretend that we're populists. I mean, we want to be populists, right? That's a nice thing to do. But so many people...
I don't think the alt-right knows what it is right now.
Oh, it's still figuring itself out, but so many...
I like to call it a search for a new fusionism. Are you aware enough about American politics to know fusionism?
No. Keep going.
It was basically Reaganism. It's and it makes sense if you abstract away and think about the Cold War time of everything. It's strong military, it's balanced budget, and it's social conservatism. And it's trying to maintain the entire coalition of the right, which is basically the anti-communists of that period. And that's one thing that the right's still trying to figure itself out. It happened after Clinton's 2 terms, and the exile of the paleoconservatives after Bush winning his election. That was kind of an augur that the paleoconservatives, the isolationists of the Republican Party. Of course, there are libertarians who are isolationists out there. I don't want to demean them, but the paleocons were more influential and in closer circles, and their exile was kind of portended by the Bush administration. But before that, we tried to get all these right-wing people in a group, and we called that fusionism, and we tried to make that into a coherent philosophy. The alt-right has a few extra ideas out there that aren't accepted in mainstream society that have a nice amount of evidence for, that at least makes it arguable, even if you disagree with them. Those ideas are things like the differences between the sexes lead to political implications that are essentially more conservative. So Dr. Laura is not quite establishment right-wing, but she's like talk radio right-wing, and she's pretty much manosphere. and then HBD, which is definitely outside the mainstream. There's a few people who talk about it. Charles Murray talks about it, and he's in the mainstream. But those are the major ideas, I think. And outside of that, and I'm surprised by how much they say how much outside the mainstream they are, but because usually it is well within the mainstream. And I've kind of gotten tired of people who saying, I'm so far out and I'm so heretical. I'm like, I can pin you down to someone you would end up voting for if you would just, take off the blinders of having to be so contrarian. You have a few more hobby horses that aren't in the mainstream right now. And might not ever be, might be in the future, who knows, with politics.
But if you can just say them in a goddamn polite manner.
Yeah.
Like, this is what...
I've never got someone angry at me for suggesting HBD, to be honest.
Actually, I've been on dates with girls of different races, and I've brought up HBD and gone on at length about it. And I won't go into details, but we were back at my place later. It's all about how you present it. So part of the problem I was bringing up earlier was this populist urge to pretend that everybody's being brainwashed by McDonald's. You know what? Some people, I don't understand why. I think it tastes like garbage, but some people love eating at McDonald's. They're not being exploited. They're idiots. Stop trying to save them. They're not going to stand up for you because you saved them. Stop being a white knight for the degenerates. But you're also right that if you just speak honestly about so many of these things, so many of these controversial topics, but don't be a dick about it. So many people want to, they're angry, they're passionate, so they bring up controversial topics in the rudest way possible.
I can think of some vloggers who do that.
Exactly. And all you're going to get is people subscribing that already agree with you and want to hate somebody else.
This is one reason I've really grown tired, and I might like it for a while. There's a part of me that really does like a polemic and a smackdown and all that sort of stuff, but you've got to earn it. You've got to deconstruct the point, and you've got to deconstruct a good version of the point. There's this trend, and not exactly a trend, it's a staple in, say, manosphere, where you take the opinion of some Huffington Post nobody who's a feminist and take her whatever and deconstruct her and show that she's wrong. Wow, you proved a journalism intern at Huffington Post wrong. Good job.
And the irony is that at the end of the day, she's getting a paycheck, and you're a blogger.
Yeah.
So who really wins?
I tend to like the approach of only engaging with the most critical version of a claim you can find. If you can't find a critical version of a claim and it's ignorable, just ignore it. Your life is going to be better. Unless you're a guy who wants to measure his dick size and get a whole bunch of mediocre blog viewers who aren't going to point you in the direction of great books and who aren't going to point you in the direction of great content. If all you want to do is get popular, then by all means promote controversy. But if you want to make actual intellectual progress, read primary sources, find the starters of these movements, get in contact with their work, and wrestle with them.
Oh, yeah, like we're not advising how to be famous right now. This could be terrible advice.
Oh, this is terrible advice to be famous because you have to have something that fits into a soundbite. But if you're famous, that's generally a sign that there's something wrong with you. I've seen famous people. Society eats their own. You don't last very long. Have you seen Amanda Bynes' Twitter page lately?
Good Lord, like seriously, my friend, I would really love to be an anonymous science fiction author living in the woods with a couple of dogs and a hot wife and some kids.
It sounds like a Paul Bunyan version of Neil Gaiman.
Pretty much. Like, I'm sure as hell not doing this because I want to be famous. I'm doing this because somebody needs to do it, and fame is one of the unfortunate side effects. Quite frankly, between you and me, when somebody starts photoshopping your face, it kind of hurts your feelings.
Mm.
You got to deal with it. It's like one of the consequences of doing what you got to do, but there's going to be people that hate you.
Well, I mean, if you have been commenting on the internet for some time, you should be familiar with that.
Oh, exactly.
I mean, I spent most of my time on Reddit, and I've only recently gotten my first blog, but I have been in enough fights on the internet to know the etiquette. If you are 18 and don't know how to handle a troll, you went wrong somewhere with your life. Or you went right somewhere and you were popular in school or something. Who knows?
We are living during the era where privacy dies.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
I'd love to believe there's still potential for privacy, but there really isn't. Privacy's gone. Google has your entire internet search history. Your smartphone has the past 7 years of which...
Well, if you want to drive down to a library and then make a throwaway account on Reddit or Fark or whatever, you can do that.
Oh, if you want to go to those lengths, and if you leave your Obama phone at home, so that...
Why would I leave my Obama phone at home?
Oh, exactly. That's how you GPS.
Ooh, that's how I WIC.
Yeah, like basically privacy is gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad. It's sad because people are going to abuse it right now. There are so many people on the internet that abuse the internet to attack and bully individuals.
It's just, I mean, human beings are weird, and they're always going to be this way until the singularity comes and wipes the slate clean. And
Yes.
hopefully, the slate wiping will not be us being a paperclip or something. Read less wrong for that reference.
Most people are shitty people, and unfortunately, if you're trying to make the world a better place, you're going to run into a lot of shitty people. And the saddest thing is that shitty people are generally shitty because somebody hurt them. Which is no excuse, but you're just run into ugly people that want to do ugly things for ugly reasons.
Yeah. This is why you should adopt whatever is mainstream in your society, move to a big city, and interact with the most educated, rich people you can, because then you limit your contact with those people. You do have to sell out your ideological positions, but how much do you really care about those?
Mm.
I mean, you could move to San Francisco and hang out with Tim Ferriss.
You know, there's a very fine line between playing the game and selling out.
Yeah.
See, don't turn your beliefs into don't tilt at windmills with your damn beliefs. I mean, we're all fucking idiots. Nobody knows what the fuck they're talking about. We're saying shit, you know? I read a study and it said this.
Basically, my entire approach to everything is, I'm a fucking moron, but I just heard what you said, and you're stupider than me.
Hmm?
That is my motto, is I'll be in perpetual self-awareness of everything I have to say, and watch and nuance everything, because I assume that some PhD is going to come out of nowhere and say, actually, my dissertation is this area, and I can quote you chapter and verse on it. Damn it. But then I hear what the average person has to say about the average subject, and I'm like, okay, I'm not that bad. I'm bad. I'm horrible. I'm absolutely incompetent. But I'm not that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, I seldom have any idea what I'm talking about, but I sure as hell do compared to the people that disagree with me.
Anyway, we should
I think
finish
we've
the
had
Reds
a pretty
together.
good show. Like, we're both, you and I are clearly madmen that we like talking about things that are true a little bit too often, which is a bad, bad habit, which I don't recommend for any of the listeners. Would you agree?
I think that truth is intersubjective, and that as a society we invent our own truth in a complex sort of web of relations.
Well said. Well said, my friend. Very
So,
wise. Anyway, so as last thoughts, um, hopefully if you've been listening this long, you will like more right. You'll also like less wrong, but you'll especially like more right. I highly recommend it. Any last thoughts, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing a series of posts. I have 2 out so far, and I'm doing them as I do the research surrounding them and making sure I can back up my claims if someone comes to challenge me on the history of the American conservative movement and the ideology going back all the way to the beginning of with Edmund Burke and early Tories, and how that reacts with reactionaries, and just how radical are these people? Can they be incorporated to some extent to the modern conservative movement? Can the modern conservative movement adopt their claims while being still effectual in the public arena? And those sort of questions. I made it sound that it was mainly about campaigning and the practical side, but I'm much more interested in the intellectual side of how these ideas interact with each other.
He's a smart motherfucking man. Go read his goddamn blog and put it into your bookmarks. Anyway, I think we are done for the evening. It's been an absolute pleasure, Andrew.
Pleasure as always.
Thank you for the irrational obsession with truth. Probably unhealthy.
Oh, it's definitely unhealthy. I have never done anything healthy in my life.
No, we are lunatics. Do not imitate us. Do not try this at home. Believing in truth.
Oh, right before I have to, have you, do you know the comic book artist Jonathan Hickman?
Negative.
Oh, he has this great, it's like, Newsroom meets Fight Club, 6-issue series called, The Nightly News. And it's this really fun experimental comic. It has a lot of white space, and it's, like, the setting's always kind of weird. You're not actually quite sure where they are, but it's an incredibly good story about a cult who assassinates reporters for being liars. And in every issue, there's a little disclaimer that says the author does not condone violence. I'm a man with a child and a family. I pay my taxes, but over the issues, it becomes progressively more and more violent. Where by the 6th issue it says, I do not condone this violence. I own several guns. I plan to overthrow the government and know how to make a carpet bomb.
That's beautiful.
Or stuff like that.
All right, send me the link. I will try and put that in the box down below, folks. Anyway, all of you hip cats out there in 18th century uniforms, keep your powder dry. Aurini out.